been talking a lot lately about what it takes to actually scale your law practice. And if you've seen any of those videos, you've seen me say that scaling is 90% mental and 10% mental. And people are thinking, Dave, what the hell are you talking about? And I say it because it's cute, but it's actually quite true that growth is mostly a mental process. But what we want to talk about today is really the nuts and bolts, what we mean by that, and what you'd really be facing if you're really looking to scale your law practice. All of our clients, or almost all of our clients, will come in and the first thing they tell us is they want to grow or they want to scale. And we love that. That's what we do. That's why we started our company. But the reality is that there's some hard truths that attorneys have to face. And very often when they see those truths, they get cold feet, they get very nervous about doing this, and they end up just kind of staying in their own zone of comfort. So this will help you to kind of acclimate what is expected and what we could do even if this was something that you were interested in doing. The first thing I want to say is there's never a perfect time for this. If you wait for your caseload to push you to scale or into growth, you'll be waiting a very long time. Now that's changed a little bit because of the pandemic. A lot of divorce firms have a lot more work than they know what to do with, and that's great, but that's not always the case. So let's talk about that a little bit. You have to plan, or I should say you should just make the decision to scale first. Do not rely on your caseload. Once you make that decision, then you implement the things that you need to do, most notably typically marketing and then recruiting for new associates who will handle those cases. The other thing is that you absolutely have to have a clear plan to profitability. This catches a lot of attorneys off guard because many times, at least when we scale our practices, we have to take a step back. We take a revenue step back so that we can take 2, 3, 5 steps forward. And what do I mean by this? Well, when we budget out our expansion plan, we know that when we add associates, those associates are going to take time to scale. And when we're taking that time, we're going to have a little bit, less revenue. You have to be willing to do that if you really, really want to scale your revenue. Now, everybody does it differently, so your firm may be different. What we have found for doing this over a long period of time, it takes us about 90 to 120 days to scale. So you should be looking at that time period to give you an opportunity to actually get your revenue scaled up. And then of course, one of the biggest points is going to be, how do you handle your marketing?
So marketing is really the driver and the catalyst of growth and the ability to scale. And so when David's talking about adding attorneys or your expansion plans, I always, ask, okay, well, how many attorneys? If you're expanding to a new market, what's the saturation level currently? Because we have a formula that I've created and worked with David on, and it's applicable to any practice. And it's all about figuring out what that individual caseload looks like for a singular attorney. So that way we can multiply based on if we're adding, multiples in an existing practice, or if we're starting from scratch in a new location. So I'm going to work with a few assumptions on this, but we can always customize based on an individual firm. So when I talk to David, we work with the baseline knowledge that a scaled attorney is at a minimum 40 active caseloads. And with that being said, I then know that pretty much every month they need roughly at least 4 new clients per attorney to maintain that caseload. So that's where David's saying, it's going to take 90, 120 days to get to that fully scaled point when they have a full caseload. And that might not even be 40 cases, but it means that they have at least enough active work that their billable hours are meeting, your agreed upon threshold. So working with the assumption that we need 4 new clients per attorney per month, I'm able to then say, okay, if we have a 50% conversion rate for consults to clients, if we have a 20% conversion rate for leads to consultations, we're able to kind of plug these numbers and assumptions in where we actually work backwards to figure out what's the total volume of potential clients that we need to deliver. And with that, I can then say, well, a cost per lead for Google Ads, for example, regardless of what market you're in, should be anywhere between $60 and $90. And that's aspirational for a lot of attorneys. They come to us saying that we're spending $120, $130 per lead. We have clients in Manhattan, we just had a meeting with yesterday actually, and they're currently at $88 cost per lead in one of the most competitive markets. So with that, I can then determine if our cost per lead is X, your budget should be Y. And that's gonna then figure out what we need to do from a marketing standpoint to drive that. David, you talk about scaling up in that 90, 120 days. Something that I appreciate is that you recognize it doesn't happen overnight, but we do need to have some quick wins. And that's where we use our PPC marketing through Google Ads, Facebook ads, things like that to generate those immediate leads. But then we also want to figure out how can we actually scale a law firm, and you can't be totally reliant on just one channel. And so SEO is another great place to be looking at, but that's a investment that happens over time. The next piece that we're looking at is how do we rank quickly and local, because that's usually your fastest path for search results. But then from a organic search perspective, getting onto the first page does take some time, and that can be as quickly as 60 days. A great example there is the Lincoln office. So David, can you maybe kind of share about the dynamics of that office and what made you decide to go in there? And I'll talk about what we've done from an SEO perspective.
Yeah, that's a very good it's a very good question. Before I get right into that, I want to talk about one other thing. So Brent's talking a lot about marketing, and a lot of attorneys assume that marketing is going to be the most difficult thing, finding clients. That's actually not true. If you have a good marketing company, certainly we're confident that we can deliver those kind of results. It's not really the marketing. Expansion is challenging mostly because of talent, and especially right now. So finding the talent is going to be very difficult. I can give a couple tips about that. I think that one thing we do is we always start with our own team, and the questions are, who do we know that might be willing to make a move? And then they do an intro, I do an intro through that person. We also ask our team, who have you worked with that you like to work with, that you could see yourself working with on the team? So we start there always. Of course, we also advertise, and then we look at other particular firms that we know have challenges retaining their attorneys, even though they're initially able to recruit talented attorneys. So guys, it's not just marketing. We can handle the marketing. It's going to be a talent acquisition problem, and as long as you can do that, you're going to be just fine. And then let me say one last thing, and then I want you to address the specifics about where to expand. A lot of people always start with their backyard. We're in Denver, so we're going to look at expanding in Denver. That's fine. But a lot of attorneys are missing opportunities in their states with underserved markets. And the example that I'm going to use is Las Cruces, New Mexico. So our major firm in New Mexico is in Albuquerque. There's over 1 million people there. I think 10 attorneys up there. We went to Las Cruces, which is 3.5 hours south on the border of El Paso, almost as a lark. We had an attorney who got married and wanted to know if we could start a practice down there. So we did that. We are now hiring our 5th attorney in that market, which is a lot. And what that's demonstrating is as people are moving away from these smaller towns and into bigger cities, there is just a complete lack of attorneys and competition. So by hardly doing any marketing at all, we've been able to scale from 1 to 5 attorneys in a very short period of time. Can you talk a little bit about that, about what you're seeing in places like Lincoln and Las Cruces when it comes to how quickly you can actually get traction there?
Yeah, one of the reasons I love tackling projects like that is because the barrier of entry is so much lower in a few different facets. So one being the competitiveness just isn't there in these tertiary markets, meaning that your cost per leads are just going to be lower and just require less investment than if you go to a major market and have more people bidding on the same keywords that you're bidding on. The next thing that makes it really attractive, especially if you already have a foundation of a core primary office in an existing market, you're able to then create these sub pages, child pages, whatever you might want to call them, that are dedicated to these other markets. So that's where the Lincoln example comes in. The office there, primary office is Omaha, Nebraska, largest market in the state of Nebraska. But Lincoln, is just an hour away. So when we decided to expand geographically, I was able to create, a variety of pages that were tailored to Lincoln. And within 45 days, less than, we were on page 1 for Lincoln Divorce Attorney, because our primary site already has a high domain authority, for the state overall. So when you're looking at expansion, it's looking at like where are your key strengths, and what can you use to leverage those as well, because as we've addressed in Denver, it's a highly competitive market, and there's only so far you can go. So then by us dominating here, it makes it that much easier to look elsewhere. And that's proven in New Mexico, in Omaha. And so when we're talking to other attorneys about scaling their practices, there's more than one way to do it. You can do it from a singular office and adding associates, but it's sometimes even easier to look outside and find some of these markets that go underserved.
Yeah, so the purpose of this video is not to scare the hell out of somebody about scaling. It's really to those attorneys who want to scale but really don't know what's involved, or are afraid to scale because they think it's too much of a project. So what you're hearing from us is this is what we've done, not only for ourselves but for law firms all across the United States, whether you want to scale in your own city, whether you want to find a smaller city in your own state. And some people are very ambitious and they want to scale outside of the state. We've done that in three states, and we've helped other people do that as well. We are always happy for you to just reach out and give us a holler, and we're very, very happy to kind of walk you through that process.